Ah, there it is. Shabbat Shalom. We're in Hebrews chapter 7, start on verse 21. For they were made priests without oath, but this one was made a priest with an oath. And it was said concerning him by David, the Lord has sworn and will not lie, thou art a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek. Psalm 110, I think. All these things make a better covenant because Jesus is its surety. And these priests were many because they were mortal and they were not permitted to continue because of death. But this one, because he is immortal, has a priesthood which remains forever. Therefore, he is able to save forever those who come to God by him, because he lives forever to make intercession for them. So I'll just stop there. Says that Jesus is immortal. So where is he at now making intercession? Any thoughts on that? Is it here? Is it on the land? Is it up in the heavens? Is it his spirit, or is it actually physically him? Is it the spirit of his priesthood? Looking at the language, what do you think we can establish? This gives me questions about how to answer people that are pointing to these verses. Like to say that he was born of a virgin because he's immortal. I mean, how did he become immortal? When he was raised from the grave, I guess. Go ahead, Kay.
No, I was going to ask you, like you mentioned about people pointing to this verse to say what? Like when they point to this verse to prove
not
what?
this specific, but in this general area, 7 and 8, they point here a lot. I mean, to support
to support which doctrine?
Virgin birth doctrine, and so forth. Just all throughout this whole, I'm just trying to answer anybody that's coming at it from. I want to understand it from my perspective of. It's if the author is saying that Yeshua, the anointed of David, however you want to say his name, says that he lives forever. So I want to know what that looks like, to understand that in a basic sense. What should I accept as the truth? What does that look like? And
are you pertaining to verse 24 where it says, because he remains forever, has an unchangeable priesthood?
Yes, yes,
it says,
but this one, because he is immortal, has a priesthood which remains forever. So is he talking about the he as in Yeshua the high priest, or is he talking about his priesthood? What do you get out of what does it say in your version? What's the pronoun? You think it's
I'm trying to look at the word forever because I have note here. It says for the age. So it could be like because he remains for the age, has an unchangeable priesthood. So it seems like the priesthood is the one unchangeable. In the Greek, it does say for the age, but because of him abiding for the age, permanent, he holds the priesthood, like literal in Greek.
If you go forward one verse, what do you see? That's good, Kay. Therefore, he is able to save forever those who come to God by him, because he lives forever to make intercession for them. Does that seem to be talking about the priesthood?
I think it's talking about the high priest that he is now. You know, he ascended to the Father, and he's at the right hand of the Father. Where is that? I have no idea. You know, it's in the kingdom. Where's the kingdom? You know, and the Father's obviously in heaven in whatever kingdom he's at. You know, I think it's a little bit of all of the above. You're asking as far as the spirit, is it a spiritual thing here on earth? Yeah, I believe his kingdom's here. You know,
This age. We're in this age.
I think this is when he rose from the dead. I think that was the beginning. You know, it's like, how's any of us? None of us are going to live forever until Abba, you know, regenerates us and, you know, resurrects us. You know what I'm saying? So just like in the old bones in the valley, you know, Ezekiel or whoever was talking about, you know, he can do whatever he can do what he wants. You know, he can do it all. So, but I think that's when when he was resurrected, even when he said, I have not returned to the Father yet at one time. Now, you know, I don't understand all of that, but he hadn't presented the first fruits to the Father yet. You know what I'm saying? He hadn't returned to the Father. And where was that? I'm assuming, and this is an assumption, it was up to the Father in what, seventh heaven or whatever, you know, up to his throne, you know. But that's way over my pay grade, so to speak. But he's living forever, and he doesn't have to. We don't need another priest. You know, one dies off, another comes in. Same as with kings. One king dies, the next 6 are bad. It's consistent. Now we have a good priest, a good king, so to speak. And to me, you know, that's it. Yeah. How do we unravel that? I don't know, but Abba unravels it for us. You know what I'm saying? Anyway.
It's a good comment, George. I have questions too. I'm wondering if it's, you know, like you said, all of it. So I guess we can assume we have a high priest that lives forever. So is there only one priest right now, or is there, you think there's more?
Well, Peter or whatever talks about we're all made priests. Now, I don't know how that works, and I don't know if Peter was talking to a subgroup of really, really separated followers like the disciples of Messiah. I don't, you know, everybody in all is a big old word that they can throw a blanket over some of the truths, so to speak. You know what I'm saying? But I mean, there's more than one priest. I believe that. As far as helpers, you know what I'm saying? There's one. I think there's only one high priest king, and that's Messiah. But sure, you know, we're all brothers and sisters, and a priest for this, a priest for that. We're all body parts, so to speak. You know what I'm saying? So if that's all in the priesthood of serving the body, sure, there's more than one. There's more than one there, you know, from what I read. Now, maybe all is one and one is all here. Now, don't get me into that. You know what I'm saying? But that's it.
Thanks, George. I think the author of Hebrews here, he's comparing a number of priests, the Levites, like back in 21, he says, for they were made priests without oaths. He's talking about a number of Levites. And then he brings it, he says, this one was made a priest with an oath. And then he quotes a psalm. And all these things make a better covenant because Jesus is its surety. And these priests were many. They were mortal, and they were not permitted to continue because of death. But this one, because he is immortal, has the priesthood which remains forever. Therefore, now in 25, if we change to he, therefore, the priesthood is able to save forever those who come to God by the priesthood, because the priesthood lives forever to make intercession for them. Now, can we say it that way, or do we say, therefore, Yeshua is able to save forever those who come to God by him, because Yeshua lives forever to make intercession for them? So either or both. What does anybody think? understand the author's point. Go ahead.
I have he refers back to that psalm, and that psalm is being spoken to an individual saying, you are a priest forever. And so I'm thinking that this is more talking about that, talking more of the role of the individual who is seated and is a priest that remains, that carries out the duties for all time. Like it's the office of that. Yeah, so I don't necessarily think that it's a priesthood in that it's a multiple people that are filling that role. I think it is speaking to the Lord in Psalm 110. And that's who the author of Hebrews is referring to.
Well, good point, Carrie. Any other comments on this? Because I'd like to kind of put a pin in it. I'd like to decide where it's at and then move forward. If looking at the language of the Greek maybe would help, and that's pretty in-depth, but trying to figure out all those pronouns. But let's say that Carrie's right. And let's go forward to verse 26. Would somebody like to read 26? Just read to the end in their whatever version. So Hebrews 7:26.
I'll read it. 26 until the end. Okay. For it was fitting that we should have such a high priest, kind, innocent, undefiled, having been separated from sinners and exalted above the heavens, who does not need, as those high priests, to offer up slaughter day by day, first for his own sins and then for those of the people. For this he did once for all when he offered up himself. For the Torah appoints as high priests men who have weakness. But the word of the oath, which came after the Torah, appoints the Son, having been perfected forever.
So what is your translation of that, Kay?
What I'm understanding is the difference between the high priesthood of Yahusha and that of the Aaronic high priesthood is that he did not offer slaughterings, but he slaughtered like himself. Like it was obedience till death. That's what I understand from here. Like, dying to yourself. So not like like the shedding of the blood. We are understanding this now as expressions that talk about giving up your life for obedience sake, for righteousness sake. So that's how I understand.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Kay. That's a really important, because to some, to like Christianity, it would be like he put himself on the altar as a lamb and cut his own throat, I guess. I mean, along those lines. And to me, I don't see how you can take that away from here. That's the more common way of looking at it, I think. So I appreciate that perspective, Kay. Any other thoughts? This is a big deal right here. This part of scripture. It's because all the talk about the blood and all of that, it's the life is in the blood. It's about the life, I think, and full circumcision of your life. And
I used to misunderstand this part of the passage where it says, For this he did once for all when he offered up himself. Like I used to understand this as like he offered up himself for everybody's sin. But it can also be understood as like he did once for all, like he obeyed once for all. Like perfectly, you know, he grew into obedience. But it does not say for everybody's sin. Once for all, like once and for all, you do it. Ultimately, like to the end, to the finish.
So he brought a completion to the law by perfect obedience. Would you be okay with that statement, Gay? What do you think, Anson? I'm gonna listen to your shirt. I'm not arguing. I'm just explaining what's right. Why I'm right. Okay. Hey, you got the shirt. I want to hear it. You're in charge. I'll let you. Any thoughts? No. So it seems that this reduces the need to go back and do the Levitical type offerings, the sacrifices.
Yeah.
This a change in the law, and this is where we lose the Hebrew roots. Are like you can't get rid of the Torah of Moses. You can't get rid of it, and it's like, well, either we have to keep it or we have to bring it forward. So this is one of the key reasons, I think, for the rejection of Yeshua by so many, or the anointed of David. I just say Yeshua because that's just an easy saying that's the right name. I just use that one. Hi, Kelly. Shabbat shalom. So I think he completed the law through obedience, and he did it as our high priest to establish a new priesthood and a new approach, probably going back. I think the last, in verse 28, for the law appoints imperfect men priests, but the word of the oath which came after the law appoints the Son who is perfect forevermore. I think he's talking about Psalm 110 being an oath that supersedes the law. I think that's the actual reference by the author. Does anyone?
I agree.
You agree? You want to talk, Carrie?
No, I was thinking that to keep in mind that the word of the oath that came in Psalms, not in Hebrews. And that's a key, like what you were just saying, Ty. A lot of times people throw out Yeshua because they think that he's doing away with the law. And it's like, it's not Yeshua doing away with the law. There was an oath that was made in Psalms about, saying to my Lord, you are a priest forever in the order of Melchizedek. So this was established back then, but now in the days of Yeshua, are following his life and resurrection, the author of Hebrews is drawing that connection and saying, okay, we're seeing this being filled up. In the man who was identified by the voice on high as, this is my son, and just pulling everything together for the Hebrews to help them to make sense of it all. Because I think at this point in history, the temple was still standing, and I think there were sacrifices still being made, but it wasn't going to continue like that.
So Carrie, I want to ask you a question. Instead of looking at the end of the temple period, let's look at the beginning of the temple period. Do you have any idea who the king was at the time when this oath was made? Was David the king at the time? During Psalm 110, I can't hear you.
I would imagine so. I mean,
So-
I think David is the one who's credited for that psalm, and I don't think he wrote it before he became king, and he was king up until he died. So
this was when. So what does that put us in context of the first temple?
this is before the first temple,
Exactly. Exactly.
because Solomon hadn't even built the house yet.
So I wonder what the whole thing was all about making the house. And going back and looking at the context of all that it really helps. Of, you going to build a house for me? That was the Most High said something along those lines. You're going to build a house for me? No, I'm going to build a house for you. And was it about what Solomon did? Was it ever about that?
Well, you know where I stand on that.
So it's almost like the thing was put away before it started. There was another oath. If this oath was made before that was ever built, so who's putting away Torah?
If that's true, why did God go in and have his presence in the temple?
Any thoughts? It's a great question.
It's possible that they were still in need of learning how to come before Yahweh. Because Solomon he became king after David, and I don't think he began to build the temple until a little later into his reign. I don't think that was like the first thing he did.
Yeah, I think he made his temple first, or his house first.
I'm going to answer a question with the question. Was David allowed to even consider making the house?
Say that again?
Was David even allowed to begin the temple?
No. But it was explained because he had too much blood on his hands.
Yes.
So
Yes.
it's like, it's still okay. I need a temple. I want you to build a temple, but not you. Your son will build it.
I'd be interested in looking at where that is that you guys are talking about.
Well,
Because
let's find it.
yeah, because the reason is we assume so much. Like for many years, I have assumed what was promised to David concerning his seed meant a certain thing. And I read things out of, I read that the idea was that one was going to build a physical temple. But then when I went back and looked at it again, I'm like, oh, wait a minute. Everybody assumes that, but actually the context dictates something else. So this question about David not being allowed to build a temple because he had blood on his hands, where is that? That's my question. I'm going to look for that.
First Chronicles 28:3. So my computer is going really slowly. I'll read it out of the Brenton. I'll just start reading. I'm going to go ahead with First Chronicles 28:2 out of the Brenton Septuagint. And David stood in the midst of the assembly and said, "Hear me, my brethren, and my people. It was in my heart to build a house of rest for the ark of the covenant of the Lord, and a place for the feet of our Lord, and I prepared materials suitable for the building. But God said, Thou shalt not build me a house to call my name upon it, for thou art a man of war and hast shed blood." Now there's obviously more context there, but to kind of proof text it a little bit. Where was the presence of the Most High at that point, Kelly? They had it from the
My understanding is the tabernacle is no more. All they have is the Ark of the Covenant and they had placed that at some threshing floor. And
So David wanted to build the house right there for the ark of the covenant. So they already had the presence when they moved the ark into the temple, into Solomon's temple. There, the presence followed the ark. So they already had it all the way from Moses' day, from the tent of meeting. So he was making a house for the ark to sit in, which by that would, when the presence came upon the ark, there would be a house for the Most High as well. And the Most High said, "You can't even make a house for my ark." Whatever you want to call that. There's a lot of different ways to call that the thing with the cherubims, and that's a whole long study. But
well, when you go down farther in that same chapter, verse 6, he said to me, "Solomon, your son, is the one who will build my house and my courts, for I have chosen him to be my son, and I will be his father." Isn't that pretty much indicating that God wanted a temple to be built?
But was that the final answer? Was that, or was that more teaching?
Okay.
Like what Carrie was saying. Go ahead.
I not for sounding like such a stickler, but where's the second witness to this? Because the covenant that was made with David, it doesn't say anything in there about, no, you're not going to do this because you're a man of war. You have too much blood on your hands. And that covenant that was made, that Nathan the prophet told David when David had it in his heart to build, there's two different places. It's found in Chronicles and in Samuel. So my question is there a parallel to this passage here in Chronicles in another location? Like, is it in Samuel? And I haven't seen it. And so my question, and this is just throwing it out there. It's not a resolve.
It's in 2 Samuel 7.
2 Samuel 7 what?
Okay.
I mean, does it actually say about him having blood on he's a man of war and...
Okay, I'll take a look. Oh, yeah.
I'm wondering, so it was David's idea, right? All along to build the temple. And who gave the patterns for the temple built by Solomon later on? Where did the patterns come from?
I think there's two. I think the problem here is that we're making the word for house synonymous. I think the whole lesson proves that there's different ways. The phrase "the house," I think that was the seed of David. The house that matters was the house, the priesthood, after the order of Melchizedek, the high priest of that. That's the house that the Most High was going to build. But this idea of David wanting to build a house, he was wanting to build a physical structure. And there was a learning process to be gone through here. He allowed it just the way he allowed the tent of meeting. And there was a lot of framework given in Exodus. So I assume that a lot of the stuff given in Exodus was the template for what they actually did with the first temple. I haven't gone through every point of it, but I think that was probably the framework for it. That's just an assumption.
Sorry, I'm not going to say much more here. This is something that I would want to explore further, but I'm wondering if David misunderstood what Yahweh had said to him through Nathan.
I agree.
And that he commissioned Israel. He said, okay, this is what he interpreted it for the people, but he misinterpreted it. And the Father allowed it.
He probably was excited. He was like, all right, we're finally going to be a thing here.
And he probably used the fact that he did have a lot of blood on his hands, and that justified in his mind why he wasn't tasked with building a house for him. And again, like I said, I don't see any second witness or a witness where it says Yahweh said to David or Yahweh said to Nathan the prophet to tell David. I don't see that. I just see David's interpretation of, or him saying this is what Yahweh told me or whatever. But anyway, just something to further explore. I don't want to derail this whole conversation.
Samuel 7 is a great place to be, though, because that's where the covenant was made with the seed of David. I mean, right there we have the answer. If we read the whole chapter, I think we should just back up and read the whole chapter real quick. If somebody will just, I like it out of the Septuagint better, but whatever. Let's go to 2 Samuel 7. Let's go ahead and read let's read to verse 17. 2 Samuel 7, 1 through 17. And if anybody wants to read it, go ahead.
Well, I have the NIV. Do you want to hear it out of the NIV?
Carrie loves that one. That's the one she
The
did.
inspired inversion.
Yeah.
What do you have, Kay?
Septuagint.
Oh, well, go ahead and read it.
Okay. And it came to pass when the king sat in his house, and the Lord has given him an inheritance on every side from all his enemies round about him, that the king said to Nathan the prophet, Behold now, I live in a house of cedar, and the ark of the Lord dwells in the midst of a tent. And Nathan said to the king, Go and do all that is in thine heart, for the Lord is with thee. And it came to pass in that night that the word of the Lord came to Nathan, saying, Go and say to my servant David, Thus says the Lord, Thou shalt not build me a house for me to dwell in, for I have not dwelt in a house from the day that I brought up the children of Israel out of Egypt to this day, but I have been walking in a lodge and in a tent. Wheresoever I went with all Israel, have I ever spoken to any of the tribes of Israel, which I commanded to tend my people Israel, saying, Why have ye not built me a house of cedar? And now thus shalt thou say to my servant David, Thus says the Lord Almighty, I took thee from the sheepcote, that thou shouldest be a priest, a prince over my people, over Israel. And I was with thee wheresoever thou wentest, and I destroyed all thine enemies before thee, and I made thee renowned according to the renown of the great ones on the earth. And I will appoint a place for my people Israel, and will plant them, and they shall dwell by themselves, and shall be no more distressed, and the son of iniquity shall no more afflict them, as he has done from the beginning. From the days when I appointed judges over my people Israel, and I will give thee rest from all thine enemies. And the Lord will tell thee that thou shalt build a house to him. And it shall come to pass when thy days shall have been fulfilled, and thou shalt sleep with thy fathers, that I will raise up thy seed after thee, even thine own issue, and I will establish his kingdom. He shall build for me a house to my name, and I will set up his throne for even forever. I will be to him a father, and he shall be to me a son. And when he happens to transgress, then I will chasten him with the rod of men, and with the stripes of the sons of men. But my mercy I will not take from him, as I took it from those whom I removed from my presence. And his house shall be made sure, and his kingdom forever before me, and his throne shall be set up forever. According to all these words, and according to all this vision, so Nathan spoke to David. And King David came in and sat.
That's good.
All right. Oh, 17, that's right.
Thank you. Where did it say anything about Solomon building a house in there?
It seems pretty clear it's talking about Messiah, because he'll never take his, it's almost crystal clear to me, unless it's assumption.
David said, I'm going to build a house. And the Most High told Nathan to tell him, go ahead and build me a house, but you're not building that house. I'll build you a house. Did I ever ask for a house while I was in the desert with the people? He said he was walking with the people. It was carried on poles from tent to tent, place to place, 40 stops, I think it was, in the wilderness. And then it's finally rested somewhere in Israel, but it still didn't have a house. So I think this is very telling. Go ahead.
Probably like in verse 12, we assumed that this was talking about Solomon, but his name was not mentioned. So it could be anybody from the seed of David after him who will remain the son of the Most High.
If it was Solomon, why in the first century are they saying, are you that guy? Are you the Messiah? Who are they waiting on? If it was ever Solomon, why would the Jews be waiting on something? It makes no sense. How many, 1,000 years later, 900 years later, probably 1,000 years later, they're still waiting on somebody. It wasn't Solomon.
Also, in that passage, there's no mention as to why David was not to build a house for him. It doesn't, I don't know what happened to my camera. It doesn't say why, you know what I'm saying? My initial point was David claimed that he wasn't allowed to build it because he was a man of war and had blood on his hands. There's a parallel passage in 1 Chronicles 17 that says almost verbatim what we just read in 2 Samuel 7, when the Lord's covenant, when Yahweh made the covenant with David. And then David, in verse 16, is David's prayer. I'm going to read it real quick, if that's okay. 1 Chronicles 17:16. This
you can
is
turn your camera if you would like.
It's not working for some reason. I don't know what happened. Okay, this is right on the heels of what we just read. It says, this is 1 Chronicles 17, verse 16. Then King David went in and sat before the Lord and said, who am I, O Lord God, and what is my house that you have brought me thus far? Okay, I don't want to read all this. This is a lot. Jumping down to verse 25. For you, my God, have revealed to your servant that you will build a house for him. Therefore, your servant has found courage to pray before you. And now, O Yahweh, you are God, and you have promised this good thing to your servant. So he understood this house that's being built for David is what Yahweh was saying to him. I'm going to build a house for you. And it had to do with verse 23. And now, O Yahweh, let the word that you have spoken concerning your servant and concerning his house be established forever, and do as you have spoken. Yeah, okay. All right, I'll let it go. Sorry.
Well, back in 2 Samuel 7, verse 12, when your days are over and you rest with your fathers, I will raise up your offspring to succeed you. I'm sure, it seems like from the context that David thinks that he's talking about Solomon here. Your offspring will be your son, Solomon, and then he is the one who will build a house for my name. But if we are thinking that's actually the Messiah, it changes the big shift in the whole context of that passage. And so then David has got it wrong, and you go over back there and read 2 Chronicles 28, and he's explaining this. It's him talking to Solomon, like farther down in chapter 20, or is that First or Second Chronicles? It's First Chronicles, actually. You, my son Solomon, this is verse 9. You, my son Solomon, acknowledge the God of your father and serve him with wholehearted devotion. Where is that at? Somewhere it said, yeah, it's verse 10. Consider now, for the Lord has chosen you to build a temple as a sanctuary. Be strong and do the work.
Now, that being said, what if Solomon could have been the guy? But he was unwise. For the wisest guy ever, I don't think he was that wise.
Yeah.
But he was the guy. He was lined up to be the guy. Israel could have.
That's quite a thought.
Israel could have got in there, but guess what? He blew it. So all this time later, Yeshua comes, son of David, shows up, and he says, "Not my will, but your will, Father. I'll do what you tell me to do, and it's going to cost me everything, but I'm going to fully circumcise my flesh. I'm going to do. The word is going to be completely flesh with me, and I'm going to be all consumed, whole burnt offering. I'm giving myself up as a sacrifice through obedience. And it's not about him letting his blood on the altar, because that's looking at the wrong thing. That's the wrong, that never was the system to bring about the atonement that needed to bring about. The real atonement never was in that system. And what if Yeshua hadn't done it? Then somebody else down the line would have done it. He had the free will, just like Solomon. Solomon could have been a guy, but wasn't.
Well, we were talking today about, Yeshua just being, he was a man like us, which, helps us to see, well, we could do it too. We can live our life perfectly. But there were some very supernatural things that happened, like David, the Spirit of God was on him. Was it involuntarily that, it just happened that David, but it was like he was chosen before his birth. And angels announced his birth, and all these things happened that set him up for success, maybe, I don't know, far more than the typical, like Solomon didn't have all those grand things happening around his birth, and announcements, and
well, Kelly,
we just don't know it.
You know what? Saul had it. Saul had the anointing. And he was unwisely. So just because you get a little help, there are anointed vessels. There needs to be vessels for a higher purpose, better clay pots than the others to achieve the purposes of the Most High. He will do that. He's the potter. He makes the ones that he wants to make and uses them the way he wants to use them. These anointed vessels, and Yeshua was one of them. Absolutely. John the Baptist was one. Elijah was one. Elisha, all of them. There's a lot of instances of this. Mm-hmm. The point is Yeshua said, I'm going away to prepare a place for you, and I will send another comforter. So now in this age, it's no longer up to, I would say it is, but it isn't. We have a high priest, but he has poured it out. The thing in Joel, I pour out my spirit on all flesh. Acts chapter 2. Acts chapter 10, pouring out on Cornelius to the nations. This special anointing you're talking about has been poured out in full measure. And yes, we're waiting to see the power, but we need to see the maturity first. We need to see the people willing to obey, not my will, but your will, Father. The word being made flesh in our lives, we walk it out.
Well, then along that same line, could it have been any offspring of David? All along the line, all the way till the Messiah? If maybe one man would have...
the fullness of time, it had to come to the point. I think that Yeshua could have not done it. I think he could have walked away. I think he had the free will to not be that guy.
but I do think that he was designated that he was going to be that guy. Like it was foretold that this is going to be the guy, and he ended up filling that role. But I do believe he had a choice. Not my will, but your will, be done. So he definitely, I agree, he had a choice. And to Kelly's question, I don't think that it could have been any guy along the line after David, because
You don't think it could have been Solomon?
no, I mean, in some respect, I guess it could have been, but yet I think the father knew that it wasn't going to be, and because he knows from the beginning, he knows what's going to happen. Not that he determines you're going to do it and you're not in that sense, but he knows ahead of time what's going to happen and how things are going to unfold. So I think it's all part of the plan, the greater plan, that it fell out the way it did because they needed to go through what they went through. And for what purpose? For our benefit, for us to be able to look back on it and learn from the history of it. And we learn from the generations that came before so that we don't do what they did, so we don't repeat history.
Well, Carrie, I agree with you. The Most High always knows what horse is going to win the race. Doesn't mean that the horse didn't put his part into it. So the point is that he could have failed had he chosen. This is why it could have been Solomon, but it wasn't. This is why it could have been Saul, and it wasn't. I'm not disagreeing with your point that it was always supposed to be the son of David.
I agree.
So you can look at it both ways.
Okay, so all that being said, Carrie, back to Psalm 110, you are basically saying that, if I understand it right, that at the time of David, the Torah was coming to an end, or the Torah, or all the law.
Kelly, I'll say that this oath superseded that which was coming in the first temple. Prior to the first temple being built, this oath with David was the answer that never would be. That
the oath?
system was never going to be the answer.
Oh.
It was never going to be the final answer.
It was going to be the transition, trying to get back to the way it was. But again, the people had the choice, and they blew it.
Well, and keep in mind, the people are operating on a different level than what what Yahweh was operating on. They were thinking in the physical. They were thinking, a physical house. They were thinking sacrifices with blood on the altar, and they had a different mindset. So they're hearing the words from the prophet, but they're, applying it differently. And even in that application, they were still messing it up.
It was the foregone conclusion because it is by genetic disposition. It's by a man dies and he leaves the Levitical thing to his son. Of course it's going to be corrupt. There was no requirements other than that's your son. He's a Levite. Now he gets to be that guy. Now, and we'll choose a high priest among us. There was not a whole vetting process. I think it was destined to fail from the beginning because the priest died. I think this is a point of Hebrews right here. Our priest doesn't die. There's no changing of the hands. He is higher than the heavens above. I think it means our skies. He's ascended he's higher than the heavens above forever. He did it. That's a different priesthood. That's the one that was always intended and the one that works. And again, this sounds so anti-Torah. This sounds so breaking Torah.
But also, keep in mind that the principle behind all of this has always been in existence. The fact that when they were in sin and the Father turned them over to their enemies and they were oppressed by their enemies, well, or when they were carried off into Babylon or Assyria, depending on which, they when the people turned back to Yahweh, when they repented, they did so without an acting priesthood, without the whole order in place, without everybody, you know, they did so prior to that. And then they came back and they reinstituted the, you know, they built the altar, and then they started having the offerings and all that again. But the point is that the Father forgives without the sacrificial system. So it was foreshadowed even back then, but they weren't getting it.
You know, really, all of this just shows the absolute patience and love of the Father, and how we get it wrong from the mount on down. You know, they're doing a golden calf. You know, they just spoke anyway. This really just shows the patience and the love of our Father, because it makes perfect sense that Abba does not need a house, but like someone mentioned, we're all excited. Let's build a church, and you know what I'm saying? It's like, man, we time and time again, we, included me, and especially me, are just goofy. You know what I'm saying? And my Father is just, he got the patience and to every once in a while kick me in the rear, but you know, it's like, wow, how long do you put up with my ignorance? Well, as long as it takes, I guess that's the Father's love. You know what I'm saying? As long as he's working in me. But anyway, it's just one big, Torah is one big lesson. It's just one big lesson on the patience of our Father, you know. Anyway.
Well, I was thinking that how they understood, David understood it, Solomon understood, God wanted them to build a house. But then at the time that Yeshua was on the earth, he understood, or the people thought that the Messiah, his point was to set up an earthly kingdom. Like Israel was going to rule, and they were going to have a king again, and they were going to be great again. And it was entirely different from what was the real plan. And so it was kind of a repeated thing there.
We're getting our long
Destroy this temple, and I will rebuild it again in 3 days. I think he understood the real nature of. Yes, good comment, Kelly and George. Good comments. Anyway, the floor is open. I'm just thinking out loud.
I just want to share that another wrinkle in my understanding of the scripture has been ironed out. You know, understanding that if Father indeed is talking about the physical temple, I've had lots of problems and questions with that. First of all, I don't know where the designs came from for Solomon's temple, and you know the extravagance, all these things, the way that the Solomon built the temple. I really question that because it's so outrageous. It's so over-designed, so expensive, and all the material, most of them, I think came from, like, where's that Shittim, you know? It's from deals from non-believing nations, from dealings with non-Hebrews. So I don't think it's Abba's ways. So it's just, and you know, the feast that they had, the amount of animals that were slaughtered, it's just so, you know, unimaginable waste and extravagance. For a simple guy like me, you know, that's too much, you know. And then why would Father allow that? I don't know, maybe for us to learn, because, you know, there was the tabernacle and it was gone. Solomon's temple, gone. And the temple rebuilt, it's gone. It's at least 3 times, right? 3 times the Father showed us that, you know, it's not about physical temple. It's not about something you build. I created you, and then you're going to create something in return. That's not it. I mean, I created you. Offer yourself to me. And I think that's the difference you were talking about a while ago, Ty. Like, when Messiah said, not my will, but your will. Solomon offered his excess wealth, and the Messiah offered, himself, his life, his obedience. It's like Cain and Abel offering two exactly different things.
Oh, and the Pharisee and the poor woman.
Yes, the Pharisee and the poor woman. The poor woman,
poor widow.
Yeah, she gave all she got.
And the Pharisee gave excess.
Yes, the Pharisees gave their excess. So it's all about spiritual temple. That much to me is very, very clear.
Excess is another word for leftover, right? Like whatever is.
So the third temple is laid in accordance to the chief cornerstone, who is Yeshua. And all he did, his character, his nature, his obedience, his position, his anointing, all of that is the chief cornerstone. And the temple is built of living stones. And it's built, and I think it showed that it's the people that are obedient to the Most High. That's what it's all about. It's not a building at all. Most High does not dwell in a temple made with human hands. So this idea of we are the temple, there's ways of looking at that. Like we're part of the whole thing. We're part of the structure. He's using us. As we line up, we just have to line up with the chief cornerstone, and we have to obey, and then we'll be part of it. And the third temple is now, and it's us. We are the third temple. It's not going to be some abomination they make over in the land of Canaan. That's not the answer. We are the answer. The children of the priesthood, of following after the high priest, being of that household. This is, to me, what Hebrews, this is what the guy's trying to tell us, trying to tell them. And we're learning from the message he gave to those guys before the destruction, to the Hebrews. It's like, this is how you be a Hebrew, guys. So we're sitting around on it. We're getting closer. Go ahead.
Anson was talking about the plans. Where did Solomon get the plans? I think that was mentioned in like when David was talking to Solomon, but it said that David gave the plans to Solomon. But anyway, weren't there plans like these people who want to rebuild build the third temple are following these plans from
Ezekiel,
yeah, from Ezekiel. So what were those plans really for? And then also
second temple. That
They
was
were
for
the second temple. So God really did give plans for the second temple. Is that right? He wanted that temple built.
But it seems the first temple is what Anson wants, the blueprints for the first temple.
Yes.
There is something to go off for the second temple.
There what?
We have at least Ezekiel. We have something to go off of.
Right, and then like
Controversial. There's a lot of sorting to do. It's kind of like Jeremiah. It's really jumbled up. So there's a lot of work to do if you're going to use that as the blueprint. So anyway.
Yeah. But I thought, and I don't have any, just what I think I know is that he told them to go back and build that second temple, and that they weren't to build their houses or anything else until they built that temple. That was to be their priority. And that, and they cried when the temple wasn't as glorious as Solomon's temple.
But there's a problem, and Jeremiah talked about it. I think Jeremiah chapter 3. The Ark of the Covenant will not even come to your mind anymore at some point. They never had the Ark of the Covenant for the second temple. It never was according to Torah standards. So yes, there was a mandate. Zerubbabel was mandated to build it, and then they had some high priest named, I think his name was Yeshua.
Yes.
So there was something going on, but it never worked out. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I know that it got destroyed again, and I don't think rebuilding it for a third time in the physical form is going to help anybody. I think that's going to be a huge problem. I wouldn't get anywhere near that place personally. So I think the author of Hebrews gives us a lot of help.
Also, keep in mind that those instructions in Ezekiel, they're all just visions. They're visions that he had. I don't think that was the same as Moses getting instructions from Yahweh. This is what I want you to do. I think it might be different. I don't know. It's something I would personally I want to look into more. That was it.
Well, next week we'll start on chapter 8. If anybody has any questions or anything they want to talk about, any comments concerning chapter 7, we'll start off with that next week. So if you think of anything this week, bring it up, and then we'll start on chapter 8. So that's been an hour. Anson wants to get on there. Go ahead.
I don't know if this is connected. I just thought of something. Because when we were reading a while ago on 2 Samuel, I'll read again that part. He shall build for me a house to my name, and I will set up his throne even forever. I will be to him a father, and he shall be to me a son. Okay, here. And when he happens to transgress, then will I chasten him with the rod of men and with the stripes of the sons of men. Okay. So this could be talking about one, the Messiah, or his sons. Okay, so I don't have an answer for that. My question here is, if this is pertaining to Messiah, I'm just curious with this part, that when he happens to transgress, then will I chasten him with the rod of men. So, if this is Messiah, does it open the possibility that he will transgress? Because I just remembered a teaching Kay was listening before, and it says, it quoted the part where Yahushua grew in wisdom and stature, and said, how can someone grow,
If he was born perfect.
if he was born perfect? Like there has to be a part where he's transgressing, and then he's growing in stature, in obedience and maturity, then he becomes better and better. That just, opens the possibility that he is not.
Sounds pretty human to me. Anson. I think we started about like 7:21 to the end, somewhere in there, something like that.
Okay. Okay, so I'll start in 19, and I want to just read how this is written, because it's a lot of the stuff you guys are saying. It makes sense.
What are you reading from, Michael?
The Pure Word translation of the New Testament.
Okay.
I'll start in verse 17. Because he bears record, you are a priest forever, according to the priestly order of Melchizedek. Because there is actually occurring a putting away of the commandment going before, because of itself weak and useless. Because the law made perfect nothing, but the bringing in a better expectation through which we approach near to God. And not according to those without an oath statement, because they actually became priests without an oath statement, but him with an oath statement by his saying to him, the Lord swore and shall not regret. You are a priest forever, according to the priestly order of Melchizedek. By so much, Jesus became a guarantee of a better covenant. And they indeed, many more priests being made forbidden to continue along, because they are now ending in death. But this man, because he continues forever, therein has an unchangeable priesthood, wherefrom he also is able to save in the extreme, those who are coming near to God through him, always living to make intercession in behalf of them. Because he was being such an appropriate high priest to us, personally holy, without evil work, undefiled, being made separate from sinners, and made high in the heavenlies, who has no necessity daily,
as high priests, first to sacrifice for their own sins, after that bearing up as in an offering those of the people, because this he did one time, bearing up as in an offering himself, because the law makes men high priests, having infirmity, but the spiritual word of the oath statement, which followed after the law, the Son forever made perfect.
10. You're 10, Yizzy.
It's pretty straightforward and easy to understand when you have the right filter. And it's extremely confusing otherwise. That's a really good translation, Michael. It helps me to get the whole context of that.
Yeah, I think, I just thought that would add some value to, or at least some confirmation to some of the things you guys are saying.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and end it and let Carrie take over. A good session today, guys. Thanks for all the input. And I think we're still growing. I think we have stuff to learn. Shabbat shalom, y'all. Thank you.